Thanks, Wes. As if the Amish weren't creepy already. So Deadly Blessing tells the story of a woman who loses her husband to very mysterious circumstances and believes the religious cult nearby may be responsible. What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the Wes Craven review series. If you are just now joining me, I have already reviewed The Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes, and I will say for sure now I do plan on reviewing the remake of The Last House on the Left as well as the two modern Hills Have Eyes movies alongside this review series. So, if you're a Wes Craven fan, please hit that subscribe button so that you do not miss any of the carnage that we are going to get into in this review series. Now, Deadly Blessing is a movie that I've actually never even heard of before. Last House on the Left, Hills Have Eyes, I may not have seen them, but I have definitely heard of them. It's within my pop culture consciousness. Deadly Blessing, never heard of it before, never recognized the poster, never seen a clip or a trailer of this movie. This was kind of this weird, hidden Wes Craven movie that I didn't even know existed. So it was a really interesting first watch for me because I had no idea what to expect. I didn't expect the story. I didn't know whether to expect this was being kind of more the grindhouse, almost exploitation version of Wes Craven, that hard-hitting edge that he had early on, or if this is more the commercial side of him that came later on. This was a complete blind walk-in. And in a way, you can watch Deadly Blessing and you kind of see this as a bit of a transitional film to where you have that early exploitation, hard-hitting, trying to not get an NC-17 or an X rating version of Wes Craven. Then you have this film that's kind of transitioning him more into where his films go in the rest of his career. All right, horror fans, does this scene look familiar to anybody? No, not that one, goddammit. Much better. But is this a hidden gem? Is this one of those unsung Wes Craven classics that I am pissed that I have never heard of or seen before? Or do I understand why this is a movie that not a whole lot of people have talked about? Let's get into it. And starting my positives off, I think that the entire concept here about having this woman that lives next to essentially this very religious Amish type community, and some sinister things start to happen, and just the lifestyle and just the visuals of that community being very unsettling for her as well as you as a viewer. This is no disrespect to the Amish community. I mean, fully respect anybody's religious choices or lifestyle choices as long as they're not hurting anybody else, but as somebody that lives very much in modern society, that uses technology, that watches movies and listens to music and plays video games, the Amish community are very odd. They're very odd to look at. They're very odd to understand. This community that just shuns everything aside from just old school tools, going and working every single day and living that type of a lifestyle, it's very hard to understand for somebody in my perspective. So there's always been a bit of a weirdness to it, a bit of a disconnect that either lends itself very well to comedy, a la Kingpin, or lends itself very well to horror, a la Deadly Blessing. And so the entire concept of having this weird supernatural or possibly even slasher element in this film and having them be this, almost the atmosphere themselves, just the people in this community creating this really eerie presence in this woman's life, was a really cool concept. And I think that side of the movie is actually realized and utilized very well.
If thine hand offends thee, then in God's name, cut it off.
And I think especially the first 15, 20 minutes or so is really effective at building tension, is really effective at setting you in this situation, giving you just enough information to understand what is going on, why this woman lives here, why they're so close to this community, her husband being somebody that was a part of that community and then left to wed her. I mean, giving you a lot of context to a lot of possible conflicts to come later on in the film. And just the way that it's shot, the way that the atmosphere goes, the way that the tone of the movie starts off, it gives you a really eerie vibe that gets you hooked in and gets you interested on what this movie is going to take you on a ride for. And especially in the last half of the film, this is a movie that really deals with paranoia as far as, Sharon Stone and the other friend that comes to live with the main character, and them knowing about the situation that caused her husband's death and knowing that there's probably something sinister going on. There might even be a killer out there, but Sharon Stone's character especially starting to have these dreams and these nightmares and these visions and starting to see things while she's awake and having these nightmarish visions about spiders and going to pour a glass of milk and it's filled with blood, and it almost created this atmosphere to where I felt like they were all going to eventually turn on each other, thinking that they were all part of this cult or they were all part of the evil. It didn't quite go that way, but I thought that the movie did a pretty commendable job at taking what could have been just a very straightforward religious horror film or a very straightforward slasher movie and incorporating a lot of paranoia and a lot of loss of trust within the good characters. And my final positive for being that transition movie, for getting Wes Craven out of that very exploitation and raw visual that he went for in his early films, I think that there was a lot of visual artistry going on in this movie as far as setting up the atmosphere, as far as realizing these nightmarish visions. There's the poster image where the demonic hands grab Sharon Stone's head and she goes white, and you have the spider coming down into her mouth and stuff. There was a lot of really interesting changes in his approach and how he shot scenes and how he framed scenes and how he just built creepy, eerie atmosphere as opposed to just going for exploitation, violence, sexual assault, things to just like assault your senses with and to make you feel uncomfortable because of things that are so real. This kind of delved into more supernatural element, and for being the first film where he really did that, I thought he did a pretty decent job. Moving on to the mixed, there's a lot of things in this movie to where it felt like Craven had a ton of different ideas: slasher film, religious horror film, nightmarish visions, the trust aspect, the whole paranoia type movie, like a bottle film where they're stuck in this farmhouse and don't really feel like they can leave. Even getting into the third act itself, where you have all of these twists and turns and reveals and visuals and coming out of nowhere, and it just feels like there was so many ideas that none of them really felt 100% realized to their potential. And I don't even feel like all of them truly came together by the end. It's a bit of a hodgepodge movie. You can't really define this. I can't tell you it's a religious horror film because that's only one little tiny aspect of it. I can't tell you it's a slasher film because aside from the very first 15 minutes and the last 30 minutes, there's not a whole lot of slashing. And especially when everything starts to be revealed and the truths are revealed, even leading up to the final little jump scare, final little gag before the credits roll, it really just feels like there was like 4 or 5 different ideas for the end of this movie and they all just kind of got thrown in together. So on one hand, it's memorable because it's kind of batshit crazy and there's so many things you can talk about here, and it's a movie that packs a lot more into its concept than you would expect it to based off of the cover and based off of the small little synopsis that I can give you. But I feel like if they had just taken 2 or 3 of those ideas out, this could have been a much more focused movie for sure, but a much more memorable movie if it had done 2 or 3 things great instead of 5 or 6 things pretty decent. And my last mixed element, I thought that Michael Berryman's character was awesome, but he wasn't in the movie enough. He was kind of the man-child of this community. He was somebody that kind of like the Adrian Brody character in The Village to a certain extent. That was kind of the vibe that I was getting. And from the beginning of the movie, he's really creepy because he's the one chasing people around and he's like, "You're part of the incubus. You'll be shunned. You must repent." And there's something really creepy about his presence, that he's just this wild man-child running around spouting off this religious shit. And I thought that there could have been a lot of interesting conflict with him and the main characters. There could have been a nice little red herring there if he wasn't going to end up being the killer, making everybody believe that he's the one doing all this fucked up shit. But within 15 minutes, he's out of the movie. So it was, for the limited time that he's in the movie, I think that he's great. But I think the movie could have really benefited from having that character around a lot more. Now, as far as negatives, I felt like this movie dragged its ass after the first 15-20 minutes. There's a whole middle section and even part of the third act where it just felt like things were not going anywhere. There's just a lot of talking, a lot of different things going on as far as conflict between this girl and her friends, conflict between this girl and this religious community, the Hittites, conflict between the leader of the Hittites and the one member that kind of is feeling the pull towards modern society and has a crush on one of the main character's friends. And then you have everything in the third act revealing the killers and what their conflict is. And it's just a movie that took forever to really get going after that opening act of the film, to the point where I was getting really impatient. I was getting really frustrated. I'm not somebody that likes to grab for my phone, especially when it's a first time watch, and especially when I'm planning on reviewing that film. But man, I felt the pull hard. I was like, oh, I need other things going on in my fucking vision right now, because this movie is just killing me. I don't know if you can attribute that to a pacing issue, or if you can attribute that to maybe Wes Craven going for a bit of a slow burn, tension building experience that wasn't really building nearly enough tension to make that work. But there was like an hour of this film where I was just getting really impatient. There was just nothing really interesting going on, and it felt like there was nothing really interesting being built up to. And finally, I didn't really like the way that this movie wrapped up. I thought that there was so many things revealed that was given little to no explanation. There were some things that were revealed that, to me, I didn't even understand what was being conveyed there until I started watching some retrospectives and reading up on the movie afterwards, trying to get an idea of its legacy. I mean, there was a reveal of the two killers in these women that we met early on in the film. I barely got an understanding of why they were the killers, and I don't think the movie really focused too much on that. And then it's implied, apparently, that one of these women was actually a man. Her shirt gets ripped open, and it's a flat chest, and that was all the movie really gave us. And I'll be honest with you, when I saw that scene, I was just like, oh, she ain't got no titties. Okay, that happens. I didn't think, oh, she's got a dick. It wasn't like Sleepaway Camp. It wasn't right in your face, oh, this is a guy. But nonetheless, she had a crush on the main character, and I guess that's part of the murder motivation. Again, very unclear. Then after you get through all of the killers themselves actually being taken off of the chessboard with the little bit of a shotgun fight here and there, you get to the end of the movie and Sharon Stone waves goodbye, goes away, the main girl comes back in, and admittedly kind of a creepy scene where she sees the ghost of her husband. Beware, beware the incubus. And I was like, okay, where's that going? And then the fucking incubus devil demon thing just comes out of the fucking ground like Drag Me to Hell and pulls the bitch down onto the floor, and they do this little reverse shot where all the boards go back. And I was like, where the fuck did that come from? So was that just like a verification that the Hittites were right the whole time, even though none of them were actually the villains? It was just weird. It was a weird ending. It was an ending that, like I said earlier, had like 3 or 4 different ideas, and it felt like they were all trying to do all of them at once, and I didn't feel like any of them came together. The identities and the motives of the killer, whatever the hell they were trying to say or convey regarding the whole transgender thing with that character, this incubus actually being a real thing and what that means, this whole ending just left me confused. So maybe somebody down below can kind of give me some clarification, but if I get to the end of the movie where I've already been impatient for an hour and none of it's satisfying me because I just don't know what the fuck I'm looking at, I'm left pretty sour. So overall, guys, this movie was fine. I could understand some people really liking this movie, maybe being one of their favorite underrated Craven films, but for me, it's probably not a movie I'd ever watch again. I feel like there was some good ideas. It started off interesting, and they could have been a little bit more focused by getting rid of some of the other ideas. But the movie that we're left with, I feel like, was a bit of a hodgepodge. It lacked focus, and it seriously lacked some good tension-filled pacing throughout most of the runtime. So if you've never heard of this movie and you like religious horror and slashers, maybe check this thing out, but have some lowered expectations. There's some decent ideas here, but the overall product was just an absolute mess for me. So check it out online and stream it. So what do you guys think of Deadly Blessing? Did you see this when it first came out in '81? Are you just now hearing about this for the first time, and have I piqued your interest at all despite my negatives? Let me know your thoughts down below on this film and what it means to you, and we will talk about that down below. Please like and share this video and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the rest of this review series. Up next we have Swamp Thing, and I'm going to try this weekend to squeeze out a review of The Last House on the Left remake as well. So hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of that. Thank you for watching as always, and remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.